Jorge is an associate professor of physics and astronomy at Pomona and a theoretical astrophysicist with expertise in galactic evolution. He employs high-performance supercomputers to simulate galaxy assembly, has published over 50 peer-reviewed articles and delivered over 100 invited colloquium worldwide, and has accumulated over $1 million in extramural research funding. In addition to being a world-renowned scientist, Jorge is an award-winning teacher and mentor who is devoted to creating equitable and inclusive communities of care. Jorge is the 2023 Vera Rubin Fellow at UC Santa Cruz and the 2023-2024 IDA Scholar at Flatiron Institute. As a visiting scholar of the ITC here, he founded and directed the Aztlán Institute, the summer program for undergrad astronomer of color. Jorge is the fourth Mexican scholar to earn tenure in astrophysics in the United States, the seventh outside Mexico, and served as chair of the Committee on the Status of Minorities in Astronomy during the 12 years. He will give a talk today about the intriguing life of galaxies lacking dark matter.
And you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's great to be back. And well, galaxies are lacking dark matter. What are they? Where are they? How many are there? How do you even make them? So when I think about galaxies, I like to think of them as people. So if you talk to me today, you can notice by my mannerisms and my accent where I come from. You can infer information about my culture, about my history, about my ancestry. So speaking of ancestry, I'd like to acknowledge we're on Massachusetts land. I'm a person of indigenous ancestry. On my father's side, I'm Kickapoo. On my mother's side, I'm Huichol. And this is Huichol clothing. And it's really important for me to acknowledge that. And it's also really important for us to honor the land. So when we come to a space, it's really important for us to think about the energy we bring and how we treat each other. I believe that, and many indigenous people believe that everything we do affects 7 generations. So if I'm nice to you or if I'm mean to you, that's going to affect you and your children and your grandchildren. And those could be biological or academic children. So we need to bear this responsibility. I also want to, in addition to acknowledging the people here, I also want to acknowledge the people who aren't here. So a few years ago, I had this student, Jose Flores. He died of a drive-by shooting in 2018. He gave a talk here at Phillips in 2016. And he was an amazing student, first-generation low-income student. He's also Huichol, like me. We're from the same part of Mexico. And so I'd like to honor him and everybody who is in here, the people who clean our offices, the people who take care of the landscaping, the people who are in places with war, with poverty, with hunger, who love the universe as much as we do. So I want to acknowledge them too. So, and I'd like to acknowledge my authors. This is an army of theorists with an observer. Shani Daniel is a good friend of mine. She's an observer. She's the one who actually found the real dark matter efficient galaxies in the real universe, and then we decided to write a paper with simulations and try to explain them. And this paper has gotten a lot of attention, so I've been really happy. For the most part, sometimes people say wild things when they don't understand what we do. So it's really important to communicate with them, but it can be really wild. I'm particularly touched by this too, because growing up in America, I used to read Scientific American when we first moved here. And back in Mexico, this is a magazine I used to read. So see my work covered by them, it was really moving. So let's just a bit of an outline. So first I'll give you some background. And this talk is, if you're a student, a postdoc, or if you don't work with galaxies, this talk is for you. There is no such thing as a dumb question. And if you're asking a question, maybe the others in the room might have the same question. So that's a service for everyone. Then I'll talk about Firebox, which is a cosmological simulation that we use for this study. Then I'll talk about the physical mechanisms. How do you explain the existence of these weird galaxies? And then if there is time, I will focus on other work. So I'll just listen to you. You let me know how much time I have, okay? So a little bit of background. So I'm zooming into a galaxy group called 10NGC 52. So that's a massive galaxy, and it has a lot of surrounding satellites. This is about 20 megaparsec away. And I'm zooming into a satellite of that massive galaxy, this one here. This is an extremely tiny and faint low-mass galaxy. This is called NGC 1052 DF2. So this was observed with an instrument called Dragonfly. And this galaxy, my colleague Shani Danieli found this galaxy, and it was really intriguing because it's really big for its mass. It's really diffuse, and it has this weird globular cluster. So you see those bright dots or collections of stars. So it's kind of like, it looked weird, so she decided to get time on Hubble and time on Keck to see what's going on. And then Peter van Dokkum, her PhD advisor, wrote this Nature paper about this galaxy that seems to have no dark matter. And I want to really make the disclaimer that I'm not a co-author of this paper, because every time I give this talk, people attack me, like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? They invited me to Tenerife to give a talk, and they were like really angry at me because of something I didn't do, because I'm not a co-author of this paper. So I just want to put that out there. But this paper, this galaxy, if you measure the stellar light, you can estimate the stellar mass. So it's around 10 to the 8 solar masses. Just for context, the Milky Way is like 10 to the 10.5. Good? Yes, because this is so ultra diffuse, you can see background galaxies. They might be. They might be. And I think the name of the game usually here is to throw them away, but that's an interesting application, right?
The potential is so broad and shallow that you would never know.
And I think lensing could be an alternative way to estimate the dark matter content, if there is lensing, but they don't do that here. And actually, it's the first time I hear that idea. So what she did is she looked at the globular clusters and looked at the line of sight velocities, because that can tell you something about the potential. If you have a lot of velocity dispersion, you probably have a deep potential, and if you don't, then you have a shallow potential. So this is the line of sight velocities. In white, these are the galaxies in the group, and in gray, these are the globular clusters in this specific galaxy. Now, from simulations and from something called abundance matching, you can estimate what kind of velocity dispersion you should have. So galaxies that are around 10 to the 8 should have a line of sight velocity dispersion of about 32. And this is because you can think of this, if you look at the stellar mass function, it's really shallow. And if you look at the dark matter halo mass function, it's really steep. So to match the two by abundance, the discrepancy between the two grows. So galaxies, once you start going into the low mass regime, galaxies tend to be more dark matter dominated. So you would expect this to have a lot of dark matter and to have a huge velocity dispersion. That's what you expect from simulations, from theory. This is what you observe. It's only 8 kilometers per second, which means you can use this formula here. So this formula, this connects the line of sight velocity dispersion. So you measure the line of sight velocities, you do a histogram, you fit a Gaussian. The width will be this. You can measure the size of the galaxy. So this is the radius containing half of the stellar light. So if you have those two pieces of information, you can infer the dynamical mass, the total mass of the system. So you can do some algebra, and what they found is that the dynamical mass obtained by using the velocities of the globular clusters is consistent with the stellar mass from the stellar light, meaning that there is no room for dark matter. That's really weird, especially not only because it's kind of established that you need dark matter to explain all the observations, but also because in the low mass regime, you would expect these things to be even more dark matter dominated than, say, the Milky Way. And did you have a question?
An object that's moving minus 40 kilometers per second. The one that's at delta V of minus 40.
So this is
like a single object, I think, or a single cluster.
Oh yeah, that would be a single cluster. Yes.
Yeah. So how do we understand the presence of that point in terms of that narrow distribution?
I don't know because I'm not involved in that paper.
Yeah.
But my guess, there's still a bit of an issue when you're using globular clusters to estimate dynamical masses, because sometimes you could have binaries in those clusters. So it could be misleading that you're measuring a velocity that's proving that binary rather than the underlying potential.
Okay.
But I don't know, it would be interesting to ask Shani, hey, what is going on with those there?
Yeah. Just didn't know.
Yeah. So the following year, they found this other one, DF2, and DF2 is the original one. Then they found DF4, and I'm just going to call them DF2 and DF4 from now on, and just some information if you're really curious about the kind of stellar masses, velocity dispersion, sizes. And this one, search index, is telling you something about the stellar distribution, like the morphology, right? these live in this group, NGC 1052. There is a massive galaxy in the center. This is 10 to the 11 solar masses. I want you to remember that, 10 to the 11, and this one is only 10 to the 8. And the other one is over here. That's what I think. And there is some debate in the literature. Some people think they are, some people think they aren't. But here's the thing, it's kind of like with people. You can say, oh, this person is a US citizen, this person isn't. That's fictitious, right? Also, there is no real boundary between what is a satellite or a central. We're going to see that sometimes you can be a central galaxy, you become someone else's satellite, you go in, and then you exit, and you become a central again. Because your orbit is so radial that you don't gain full membership right away, just like many of us in countries like this. So is the standard paradigm in trouble, or can we explain this with simulations? So when these papers came out, there was a lot of controversy. People in the observations were like, well, maybe you got the distances wrong, maybe you got the globular cluster luminosities wrong, maybe you did something wrong with the analysis, maybe it's binaries. People on the theory side, some people were like, we just need to get rid of dark matter. The Mon people were like, it's time to go. They do that every time. And some people were like, no, maybe we just need to invoke maybe something like self-interacting dark matter or something like that. And the thing is, people who do cosmological simulations like myself, like Lars Hernquist, if you look at, there are 15 major groups in the world. None of them found things like this in their simulations. They didn't exist. And actually, people in the Mon community were like, well, that's further evidence that Lambda CDM is wrong, because look at all the simulations, they cannot make these kinds of galaxies. Until we came along. So let me tell you about Firebox. How many of you have heard of Illustrious TNG? So if you know Lars, you know that he loves TNG. So Firebox is a bit like TNG, but a bit different. So I'll tell you some of the differences. So this is a cosmological simulation. The box size is 20 megaparsec. So it's smaller than, say, TNG 50, which is 50 megaparsec. But the advantage of this is that you can actually probe the multi-phase turbulent structure of the interstellar medium. So in simulations like Illustrious TNG, you can only go down to 8,000 Kelvin, and you cannot go to really high densities. And here you can go down to 10 Kelvin, you can go to extremely high densities, so you can really probe the structure of the ISM. You can get molecular gas and atomic gas and all that nice stuff. Another nice thing about Fire and Firebox is that in Illustrious or other simulations, what you do is the Kennicott law, which basically correlates star formation with gas content, that's something that they put by hand. So they tune their model so that you get that as a result. In Fire, what you do is the following. The Kennicott law is actually a consequence of the model, and it's actually because star formation is regulated. So basically, rather than imposing this star formation law, what we do here is we say, if you have a cloud and it's self-gravitating, it will collapse into stars at 100% efficiency. But then wouldn't the entire galaxy just collapse into stars? The answer is no, because you have feedback, because you have stellar winds, because you have supernova explosions. So that kind of regulates the system, bringing the efficiency down to observations. I'm someone who likes to eat, so imagine we were eating cookies. If everybody was really neat, we will all eat all the cookies and very efficiently. But if I'm really messy and you're disgusted by how messy I am, you would stop, your hunger would go away and you wouldn't eat anymore. So we would regulate the consumption of cookies, just like feedback regulates the consumption of star formation. So how do we compare with other simulations? So in cosmological simulations, we want to optimize two things, resolution and volume. If you have really high resolution, you can probe really tiny galaxies, and you can probe galaxies in a lot of detail. You can really get their structure, just like if you take a picture with a camera that has a lot of resolution. But with volume, you get a lot of galaxies, and you get galaxies in multiple types of environments. You can get galaxies that are very isolated, galaxies that are in groups, galaxies that are in clusters. So you want to get a diversity of environments and a diversity of histories. So you want to optimize both. So here I'm showing you this box size versus mass resolution for Firebox. These are some of the Zoom simulations. So basically, in the Fire collaboration, we like to take single galaxies. We take all the particles today. We go back in time. We split those particles and make a really high resolution of that galaxy and just run it forward in time. We call those Zoom simulations. So these are where the Zoom simulations are. Firebox is the entire box, and the resolution is comparable to these Zoom simulations. Also, you can have these large volume simulations like Illustrious TNG. So these boxes, these green boxes, are the TNG simulations. You see that they do have a bigger volume, but the resolution is really low. So because you want to optimize what we call discovery space, you want to actually do both. Now here I'm talking about mass versus length, but it would be nice to compare apples to apples, right? So here what I'm showing you is rather than the mass resolution, this is the spatial resolution. So this is where Firebox is. This is where the zooms are. So actually we do better on the zooms. And this is where the large volume simulations like TNG are. So when you talk about dynamic range, Firebox has a dynamic range of 1 to 1 million. I also want to make a distinction between open symbols and dark symbols. So open symbols are simulations that cannot resolve the interstellar medium, whilst the dark ones are, like Firebox. So Firebox is a large volume simulation that's capable of capturing the turbulent structure of the ISM. So you can take a large volume like this, you can zoom in, you can get a single galaxy, and within that galaxy you can actually follow these giant molecular clouds, which would be impossible in a simulation like TNG or many others. This is what makes this simulation really powerful. So what do we find? So what I'm showing you here, this is the mass in dark matter, and this is the mass in stars. And I'm going to be focusing on low mass galaxies because we know from observations that these dark matter efficient galaxies are somewhere around 10 to the 8. So we're not going to be looking at the very massive galaxies. This is color-coded by the fraction of mass in dark matter. So if you're really pink, you're very dark matter rich. And if you're kind of magenta, you're getting close to the dark matter deficient regime. I can split this plane into the dark matter deficient and the dark matter dominated regimes. And DFT and DF4 would be down here. But now I'm not only focusing on the central galaxies. I'm only focusing on the galaxies that are the dominant galaxies in their halos. But in reality, you also have satellites, right? So you have a central galaxy. You can have satellites. Each of them have a subhalo. And in some cases, like the LMC, the SMC, you can have a satellite of a satellite within a sub-subhalo. So this hierarchy continues, right? So once you include all the satellites and satellites of satellites, this is what happens. You see that this region here becomes populated. And then you see a bunch of things here. So what I want you to think about this is, let's say we take this satellite here. If you go back in time when it was not a satellite, when it first came into that group, maybe it was somewhere up here. But because it lost a lot of stars and it lost a lot of dark matter, it traveled this way. So most satellites, they lose some dark matter and they lose a lot of stars and they end up down. So you go from here to here. But there are a few, these 7, that actually cross this line. And actually they lose dark matter more efficiently than they lose stars. They do lose stars, but they lose dark matter very quickly. I gave them really nice names. Wolf, wild potato, pain, blue, long-haired bird, and deer. And when I found these 7 galaxies, I asked my collaborators, well, I have 7 galaxies, what should we name them? And we live in Southern California, and they were like, well, the Disney characters. And I was like, well, that's cute, but I don't like denigrating people with dwarfism, so I'm not cool with that. Other people told me, well, how about the 7 sisters in Greek mythology? And I've liked the idea, but I'm not a woman. I felt like it wasn't my place to do that. I'm a person of indigenous ancestry, Kickapoo and Huichol. So I started asking my indigenous friends if they knew any instances of the significance of 7. I have a friend in Texas who is Cherokee, and he told me of the 7 clans. So each of these clans has its own personality, cuisine, culture. These are matriarchies. So you get your surname from your mother, and the lineage goes through the mother, as it should be, in my opinion. And each of them have their own history and personality, and the same is true with the galaxies lacking dark matter. So there's going to be a quiz, so pay attention. So let me introduce you to the galaxies themselves. This is a mock HST image. So this is not a real galaxy, this is a simulated galaxy. This is a massive galaxy, and then you see Wolf here. In the simulation, we have dark matter, so we can also look at the dark matter distribution, and you see that there is no subhalo associated to Wolf. Maybe you've heard of the missing satellite problems, that you have a lot of subhalos in simulations and not a lot of satellites around the Milky Way. This is the opposite of that. This is the missing subhalo problem. You do have the galaxy, but you don't have the subhalo. This is wild potato, no subhalo. Paint is kind of fluffy. I like paint. No subhalo. So here's the quiz, and you can talk to each other. What do these three galaxies in the circles have in common? And you can talk amongst yourselves.
It seems like they're all clumps and streams to me.
And close to the host. Is that
Yeah,
close?
I wonder like what their lifetime is and like number of orbits or something.
I'm just listening.
Any thoughts?
I think they're all like streaming.
They seem to have streams. They look disrupted. I heard they are really close to a massive galaxy. What about their colors? So would you say they're very blue? No, right? They're kind of reddish, which means that they are not really making a lot of stars.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of dust, so probably they're like they don't have any star formation. Those things ended their star formation a long time ago. And the obvious one, they are lacking dark matter.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is another one. This is long hair. Long hair is really far away from the center of the halo. That's like 400 kiloparsec. And long hair has a really weird dynamical history. It comes in, it crashes within 3 kiloparsec of the central galaxy. It leaves the halo. It's a central for a while, and then it comes back. It's on its way back. So we call this a backsplash galaxy. And this is the dark matter distribution. And the last three, they are in the same system. This is bird, blue, and deer. Deer is kind of fluffy, and these two actually came together. They're like the LMC and the SMC. They've been dancing around with each other for a long time, and then they came together, and they've been together ever since. And this is the dark matter distribution, so they are dark matter free. So going back to this plot, this is where these galaxies are. And now, just to give you a mini review, there are 2 dark matter efficient galaxies in the observations, DF2 and DF4. We found 7 in Firebox. They tend to be satellites. They have tidal features. They're red. 3 of them are very close to their host. 1 is kind of far away, a backslash galaxy. 3 of them are in the same group. And of all of them, Wolf is the one that resembles DF2 and DF4 for the most. It's consistent with those galaxies in terms of mass, Sarsich index, which is the shape of the galaxy, velocity dispersion, size, bunch of things. So it's in the world of cosmological simulations, this is the only galaxy consistent with those, which I think is a big accomplishment. So how do you make them? So I think this picture can give us a clue of how to make these galaxies. It seems like maybe interactions with a massive neighbor plays a really strong role, right? So this is what I'm going to show you next. So this is the stellar masses of the satellites, and these are the stellar masses of the dominant galaxy in the halo where they live. So they're central dominant companion, right? So this would be like the students and the PhD advisors or something like that. So you can draw some lines just to guide the eye. So for example, like these galaxies would be major mergers of 2 very similar galaxies, right? And I can include the observations. DF2 and DF4 would be there. And the 7 dark matter efficient galaxies are along that line. I can make a prediction. If we stick to satellites between 10 to the 8 and 10 to the 9, orbiting massive galaxies with at least 10 to the 11 solar masses, in our simulations, we predict that 30% of those hosts should harbor at least 1 dark matter efficient galaxy. So this is how I tell observers, this is where you look. The host has to be at least 10 to the 11. Something like the Milky Way wouldn't be able to host a galaxy like this. So you want to find it around Milky Way analogs or the Milky Way itself. If you do, that's in contradiction with our model, which means that maybe we're wrong and we need to do more simulations. Yes?
Maybe you're going there. So feel free to just tell me that. But I'm curious, what are the relative densities of these look like the central galaxies versus the small ones and the satellites? Because I'm like, if we think this has to do with like the tidal potential, maybe the density matters a lot. So
So here's the thing. So people who have been looking for dark matter efficient galaxies in other simulations, they find galaxies that are orbiting the potential. So it's like a tidal stripping, right?
yeah.
But these galaxies, they end up going within 5% of the radius of the host.
Right.
So they actually penetrate through the galaxy itself. And it happens when the galaxies are both gas-rich. So you have a lot of gas here, so it's not just gravity, it's also hydrodynamics, which I think makes it a very particular kind of collision, because this is a high-velocity collision in a gas-rich environment, which nobody has studied.
Okay.
So we make this prediction, and also you see that it kind of goes on a diagonal, so it's more of the mass ratio. So it seems like to become dark matter efficient, you have to be interacting with a galaxy that is around 1,000 times more massive. The other one, so that's one condition. The other one, and we make this prediction. The other one is the orbit itself. So we can, in the simulations, we can track the orbit. Here I'm showing you the separation between the satellite and the central as a function of time. Infall is when it became a satellite. So it's oscillating because you're doing this, and dynamical friction is shrinking and circularizing your orbit. The gray solid line is the radius of the dark matter halo of the host, and the dotted line is 5% of that. So something you notice here is the following. So you notice here that around this time, it goes within 5% of the radius of the host. So it's, as I told you before, it's going right into the center of the halo. We can look at the mass. So this is the total mass. Each vertical line is a pericentric passage. The red one is the one with the closest distance. We can look at the dark matter, the stars, and the gas. So you see that at this point here, you lose all your gas. Oh, I went too far. Sorry about that. So here you lose all your gas. And it's somewhere around this point where the stars overtake the dark matter. So the dark matter is dropping very quickly, the stars not so much. So that's why it becomes a dark matter efficient galaxy. And it happens around here when you have not only are you becoming a satellite or orbiting a massive galaxy, but you're actually plunging through that massive galaxy. And it does it multiple times. So another condition is you have to come within 5% of the radius of the host dark matter halo, which is basically the galaxy itself. These are gas-rich high-velocity collisions that could also actually be responsible for the creation of these weird globular clusters, right? So just to wrap up, what about the star formation? What is the star formation history telling us? So let's look at BIRD. This is its interaction history. And this is the star formation history, so the star formation rate. And you notice that before infall, before it became a satellite, it had a lot of burst star formation. This thing was breathing, it was really active. But the moment it became a satellite, it kind of quenched. It stopped making stars. If we look at these three galaxies, Wolf, Potato, and Pain, they have the same story. You have a lot of star formation, and then you quench and you stop making stars. And for the last 20 years, people have been devoting a lot of energy thinking about this quenching process of you have a star-forming galaxy like the Milky Way, and then you become a quenched galaxy. But here we found that there is a third thing that's happening here. You have situations like long hair where you have a lot of star formation, then you become a satellite, you continue having a lot of star formation for a while, but then you kind of like quiet down. So you don't quite quench. You're still there, but you're just being quiet, right? So this is like you're a teenager and here you're paying a mortgage, or you're being like me. And this other guy, and then you quench. And this is also a bit like that. This one, it hasn't quenched yet, but it's really quiet right now. So I think this is an interplay of feedback, the potential trying to stabilize disk, and also the fact that when you become a satellite, your circumgalactic medium could be taken away, which is the thing that sometimes helps you kind of stabilize the disk. So the next thing to do is to continue Jose's work. I mentioned Jose at the beginning, who gave a talk here in 2016 and passed in 2018. And what he did in his paper is he made mock maps of these galaxies that you can compare directly with observation. That's really connected to your work, right? So you can make a map of H alpha or the far UV, and the ratio tells you whether or not a galaxy has bursty star formation or steady star formation. So if the H alpha SFR is much smaller than the UV one, it means that you have a lot of bursty star formation. But if they're comparable, like our own Milky Way, then it means that the star formation is steady. You're not in this bursty phase, but in this steady phase. So I've been doing this with, I guess, simulation-friendly quantities, but now it's time to actually look at things that can be compared directly with observations. So we can go beyond just the dark matter-efficient galaxies and look at all satellites and infer their star formation history. So just to summarize, here I'm showing you the ratio of the satellite stellar mass to its massive companion, central. And here I'm showing you the minimum distance between the satellite and the central in units of the radius of the host dark matter halo. This is where DF2 and DF4 would be. We don't know their distance history because you would need to go back in time to see that, but you know its mass ratio. So we say they are somewhere there. This is where the seven galaxies are. The numbers in brackets indicate the number of pericentric passages. So usually in this simulation at this resolution, once you have 3 or 4 pericentric passages, two things can happen. Either you assimilate with the massive galaxy or you are completely destroyed, right? Here we see that some of them actually chose a different path. They plunged through the inner galaxy multiple times, but they don't get disrupted, they survive. And this is I feel very personally connected to these galaxies because of my indigenous ancestry. That I have a European name, I have a European gender, I'm wearing European clothes, well, partly. I only speak European languages, but I'm still here. And these galaxies, they paid a price. They lost their dark matter, but they chose not to assimilate, and they chose not to be destroyed. And I think this is true for all of us. If you're the only woman in the room, if you're the only person of color in the room, if you're the only autistic person in the room, if you're the only one who's speaking for people in Gaza, you might feel like your choices are to be quiet and assimilate or be destroyed. I think it's important to move away from that either or mentality and think about the and both mentality. There are other choices that we can do to speak up and to defend humanity. And I'll stop here. I'll just show this mini review. And I'll stop here and taking any questions.
I have a question.
I got a little emotional, sorry.
Nice.
So in losing dark matter, like you show the part where the stars start to overcome the dark matter masses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that dark matter just moved to the central, or where does it go?
So it joins the main halo.
It joins the...
Yeah, so around the massive galaxy, the halo it builds up because it basically you're dissolving the galaxy.
Right.
And the way to think about this is to make stars you need very concentrated gas, right? So you need gas that's cold and dense, which tends to be at the bottom of the potential of the satellite. So you make those stars are very gravitationally bound, like Mercury. It would be easier to take away Neptune than Mercury, right?
Yeah.
So here what happens is the stars are very gravitationally bound, whereas the dark matter is there is a diversity of that. There are some particles that are really bound, but most of them aren't. Even if they're like inside, they might be in really elongated orbits. So yes, they are in the center, but if you weigh a little bit, they're going to be the outskirts, and they're going to be taken away easily. So that's what's at play here. I think dynamics is one thing that's at play, but another one is feedback. If you have this bursty star formation, then you're actually giving particles energies, right? So I'm not really sure how that works, but that's something I'm going to look at this summer. Mm-hmm.
So I love this final plot that's in the upper right that you were showing us, and I want to ask more about densities. Sorry.
TDs.
And yeah, so I think I'm thinking about this in a similar way. And so I'm curious, in the satellites, in these 7 objects, before they have their first interaction with the central galaxy, that's what it's called, is there stellar density? Like if you take the mass of the stars and divide by the characteristic size, their radius, cube, is the stellar density higher or is the dark matter density higher?
I don't know the answer to that question.
It must be that the dark matter density is lower, right? And that's kind of how you can rip apart into this stream the dark matter. And the stars somehow survive that interaction.
Yeah, that's something I need to do is to. I got this idea from Simon White.
Yeah.
It's basically look at these galaxies at infall and find other galaxies that don't become dark matter efficient and treat them as controls and see how they work differently. Or if they were like at the inception, if they were different.
Yeah.
Because if you have bursty star formation, something that can happen is that you can actually lower down the dark matter content in the center. We call this the core cusp problem.
Yeah.
So that the halos become core because of feedback.
Yep. And I mean, it feels to me like this plot is actually that experiment, right? Because, everything that doesn't approach within a certain minimum distance is, those are all your control galaxies in a sense.
Yeah.
And you see their distributions of dark matter fractions and that sort of thing. And then there must be objects that are to the lower left corner of these ones that sort of survive that interaction, that just end up completely sort of shredded, like the Gaia Enceladus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's no longer a distinct galaxy.
Yeah.
It fell in and now it's a stellar stream.
Yeah.
And
I think those stellar streams, some of them might have populated that region, some of them might have not. You could be disrupted without even ever making it to that 5% number.
Of minimum distance. Yes. So I'm wondering if basically this is sort of the population that's right on the cusp where you disrupt the dark matter, but not the whole thing. And almost you need kind of like a fine-tuned distance relative to the tidal radius of these, which is that combination like the masses times the y-axis cubed, you know?
Yeah, but it would be nice to color code this, let's say, at infall or before the first collision, and see how much that might go.
I see. So like the before versus after.
that's quantities today at the end of the simulation.
Okay.
And I think those details are actually going to tell you why one galaxy would be at below 1% and the other one would be close to 50%. Like the ranking is probably also governed by the nature, not just the nurture of the interactions.
I don't know. This is like one of those things that's so much easier said than done. But is there any way to like watch that as a movie over all your snapshots? Like like you could see like say wild potato or something starts somewhere and has a passage, and so its minimum distance goes down, and then we could watch it over.
Yes, that's something I'm planning to do this.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. So do galaxies? It seems like if the fractional mass is larger, this process never happens, like the M star over.
You mean if you're on the right? Yeah, so what happens is when the mass ratio is close to the closer you're to unity, the more effective dynamical friction is. So if you have a major merger of two equal-sized galaxies, dynamical friction is very efficient and you merge very quickly.
I see.
So on this end, you are disrupted. On that end, you assimilate. You
because the lifetime is too short
Yes.
to ever like catch those on the sky kind of thing. Oh wow.
I think these galaxies are very wise because it's connecting to our history as indigenous people of assimilation and disruption, and that there could be a third way. Any other questions?
Curious about like magnetic field evolution in the dark matter deficient versus the dark matter rich dwarf galaxies. How much is known about that?
It's very hard to simulate, and there are some people in the collaboration who have been playing with magnetohydrodynamics and cosmic rays. And something I didn't show, but it's once you put the quasar, you can get realistic massive galaxies, but the structure of the galaxy you don't get that quite right. until you invoke cosmic rays. So it seems that that could be a promising avenue. People just think, oh, you just need the feedback from the AGN. No, you also need some other mechanisms, of non-thermal mechanisms to keep the galaxy quenched.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that one? I forget which one, but the one that keeps forming stars even after it's in fall.
So let me see if...
There's one that yeah, the bottom one there.
yes.
Like,
So that's here. So that's this one here. So it still has a lot of, it still has some gas left. This is the only one that has a little bit of gas left.
oh, so there's like the, not just the stellar mass, but the gas mass fraction.
Yeah, it's really
also.
tiny. It's like 1%,
Yeah.
but it still has a little bit of gas left.
Uh-huh. And is that because was its passage somehow different? Like, did it not pass through a gas-rich galaxy or something like that?
So it didn't have as many. It's probably a collection of things. So it didn't have as many passages.
Yes.
It probably was very gas-rich, and maybe the passages weren't that strong.
Ah, interesting. Interesting.
What I'm really curious about is this, like this transition here. Like, how come this one is not just quenched right away?
It takes like, it looks like 3 or 2.
Yeah, or the one at like long hair, especially long hair. You have really this bursty star formation that just quiets down, but it doesn't go away. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.
It's amazing the way that you can trace a galaxy back through the whole sort of simulation time and just
Yeah.
watch what it does as a single object. So.
It's really nice with simulations you can do that.